Before we get started with today's show, I want to say that this episode is sponsored by Big Danny and Sean Adams. They're the big sponsors over at patreon.com/headcastnetwork. So thank you both very much, Sean Adams and Big Danny Cool. And if you wish to join them, you can join us over at patreon.com/headcastnetwork and throw a few bucks in the tin. But enough about that. So for Sean Adams and Big Danny Cool's listening pleasure, let's get started with today's episode. Welcome to the newest episode of Head Speaks, your home of all things geeky. I am your host, Aaron Brotherhead Moss. Let the show begin. Hey, dear listeners, Brotherhead here, and welcome to episode 82 of Head Speaks. Last month, if I'm not mistaken, I talked about I think it was the Fantastic Four trailer. This month, I went and watched Captain America, Brave New World, and well, it's time to give you some thoughts on how I felt about Captain America, Brave New. I heard a lot of people dissing it because, again, that's what a lot of people like doing. Ever since Endgame, everything's all sucks and it's no good. For the most part, I've enjoyed most things in Endgame. So again, it's not all Endgame, but then again, not everything needs to be world catastrophe, world ending, half the population poof. So I mean, I enjoy these movies for what they are, but before I go any further, let's go ahead and bring in the intro. The movies with Head. Before I get started, I must say, my entire conversation is heavily filled with spoilers. So as I said, we're here to talk about Captain America. I saw weekend information on this. So I was directed, Daniel, produced by Kevin Feige and Nate Moore, starring Danny Shira Haz, Carl Lumbly, Liv Tyler the 11th, United States, the runtime. And again, I'm pulling a lot of this information because it's easier. Again, it's a continuation of the Falcon series, and it's the 35th film in the Marvel Cinematic. In short, basically, in this film, Sam Wilson, new Captain America, investigates a conspiracy involving U.S. President Thaddeus Ross, played by Harrison Ford. So again, from Wikipedia, the plot on this, and I'm going to skim through this, I think we'll see. This takes place 5 months after Thaddeus Ross is elected President of the United States. He sends Sam Wilson and Joaquin Torres, new Captain America and Falcon, to Oxalexa, Mexico, to stop the illegal sale of classified by the Serpent's rogue special ops team led by Sidewinder. They recover the items, but Sidewinder escapes. Torres is excited to be Wilson's former mantle, but Wilson is hesitant to involve Torres in dangerous missions due to the pair not having powers like the former Captain America, Steve Rogers. After the mission, Wilson and Torres trains with Isaiah Bradley, a super soldier who was imprisoned and experimented on. And I guess I can't really skim through this because there's a lot to the movie. Ross invites Wilson and Torres to a summit at the White House, and Wilson accepts on the condition that Bradley is also. Ross asks Wilson to help him. During the summit, Ross explains that a new metal, adamantium, has been discovered on Celestial, which was formed when the Celestial Tiamat merged in the Indian Ocean during the Eternals movie. The recovered items were the first refined samples of the metal and were stolen from a Japanese arms race. Ross proposes the treaty to govern adamantium distribution. As he is talking, the song Mr. Blue plays and causes several men, including Bradley, to begin shooting at Ross and apprehended by Ross' head of security, former Black Widow Ruth Bat Safan. The men regain their senses and deny any attack. While investigating, Wilson is ambushed by Sidewinder and captures. Torres tracks a call on Sidewinder's phone to a hidden black site in West Virginia called Camp. Ross tries to salvage the treaty, but the Japanese government blames him for the theft of the adamantium in the subsequent White House. Ross realizes that the mastermind behind these events is Dr. Samuel Stern, who gained intelligence after being exposed to Bruce Banner's blood during Abomination's rampage through back during the Incredible Hulk. Ross imprisons, publicly blaming him for the Abomination's action, and promised to release him if Stearns helped him to the presidency. Wilson Torres finds Stearns and learn how technology and the song Mr. Blue to control mind. He escapes, fighting mind control. Bat Seraph investigates Camp 1 herself and helps Wilson Torres. His military friend Dennis Dunphy, who has Sidewinder in custody. Wilson learned enough from Sidewinder to destroy Ross's reputation. Wilson, Torres, and Seraph go to Celestial Island. Ross and the Prime Minister are racing to claim ownership of the adamantium. Stern controls the mines to attack the Japanese fleet. Wilson and Torres intercept the planes and convince the Japanese Torres is critical in the fight. Ross tells Wilson that he had heart failure and had Stern develop his life. Ross refused to release Stern for fear they would make the pill, leading to Stern's anger and plans for revenge. Wilson is by his friend Bucky Burns. Stern kills Dunphy, who discovers that the pills have been gamma radiation to Ross's body, and surrenders himself to Burns' arrests in connection to Ross are publicly, while the latter is at a press conference. Ross loses control of his emotions and transforms into a Red Hulk, destroying part of the White House. Wilson attempts to reminding him of visits to Washington, D.C.'s Cherry with his stranger, Betty. The two fight until they're exhausted, and Ross reverts the case, I think. Get to that. Later, Bradley is exonerated. Wilson invites a recovering Torres to join the Avengers, and the treaty is ratified. Ross resigns and has himself incarcerated at the Raft, where Wilson, in a post-credit scene, and imprisons Wilson. Dun, dun, dun. So, a lot to that. Let's go ahead and dig in and give some thoughts as I go. So, overall, like I said, I enjoyed this movie. I thought it was a fantastic movie, a fantastic addition to the Captain America saga, if you will, and the Marvel Universe as a whole. But I guess I've kind of spoiled my whole thoughts already on this, but let's go ahead and take a look. So again, the movie starts out and it's 5 months after Thaddeus Ross has been elected President of the United States. I enjoyed seeing Harrison Ford as Thunderbolt Ross. I thought he did a good job. I was a little disappointed at first because he didn't have the mustache, because to me, that's what Thunderbolt Ross is known for, besides hunting down is having that mustache. But I did like that in flashbacks, they showed he did have the mustache, and they referred that, his publisher or whatever told him he should shave it off when he was running for president. So I do like, even though they didn't have it in there, I do like the fact that they made reference why he doesn't. This role was previously played by William Hurt, who actually passed away March the 3rd, 2022. Of course, he come back to the role he played previously. So, yeah, to have Thunderbolt Ross in it, I think, they need to recast it. Yeah, I think Harrison Ford, good job for what he was doing. As I said in the plot, the Red Hulk doesn't show up until the end of the movie, which some people may not like because, again, the Red Hulk seems to be heavily in the advertisements for it. He's on the promo poster and everything, so you figure that it's going to be more than the last part of the movie. But I understand that this is just the introduction to the Red Hulk, and I'm sure we'll see more of him later. So, but we'll get more about that. But yes, I enjoyed what Harrison Ford did here as Ross. I like that they did him president, for president. I do like the fact that they referred to the previous Incredible Hulk. Because again, as I said elsewhere, and I'll say it again, I think Ed Norton played a better Bruce Banner in Hulk. Well, again, the Hulk was CGI, so in the motion cap stuff, again, he did. I think Ed Norton plays a much better Bruce Banner. Mark, nothing against Mark. I just think that Ed has that Bruce Banner appearance to me. Mark looks, I don't want to say confused, doesn't, to me at least, have that. I don't know. I don't want to say he doesn't have that intelligence look about, because he does. I don't know, just something about Ed Norton. Again, I'm a big Ed Norton. And I understand, I guess, from what I understand, he was difficult to work with on the Incredible Hulk movie, and that's why he wasn't asked back. I wish things had gone better to have Ed Norton as Bruce Banner in the Avengers movies. Mark's doing a decent job. It just, I just don't see there's some people that you see at a certain role, and you can't really see anyone else in that. To me, that's what Ed Norton, and I thought he did a great job. A lot of people diss that Incredible. The Abomination effects wasn't the best, but overall I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good movie. I think I've talked about it before. I may talk about it. But yeah, so Captain America and Joaquin Torres, the new Falcon, by Danny Ramirez. I think Danny did a great job at the Falcon, the new Falcon. I do remember him somewhat from comics. Again, I'm way behind most of all my podcasts and band, kid, life else. Yeah, I'm just way behind things. So, but yeah, I have read some of the new Falcon. Again, I say new. He's been the Falcon for a while now. Again, I'm so far behind. I don't know if he's still. I do like Joaquin Torres as the Falcon. Good job. And Danny Ramirez, I think, he did a good job playing the Falcon. Kind of that wanting to be the new superhero. Kept, I'm going to say, pestering Sam to, let me be your sidekick. I want to be your hero. I want to wear the costume, And again, I think the two of them, while not 100% comic accurate, I think it's close enough. Because again, a lot of comics, from what I see, most comic accuracy to an extent. Some are willing to let it slide a little bit here and there, as long as it gives them the spirit. I think both costumes looked really good. Again, just due to technology, not only that, but also just the being feasible of the real looking wing in reality, and it wouldn't look as good probably. I think it would, but I don't think it probably doesn't work quite as good in the movies, at least for the standard movie viewer. So I understand the metallic wing. And that's going to be, they did that with Vulture, GI Raptor. Metal wings are a little more realistic, and which I normally hate using that term realistic when men of superpowers and, a man that can turn into a giant red raging beast. Realistic doesn't, and a lot of people complain about the costumes, that they don't work in real life. I say done right, they do for the most part. But speaking of costumes, in this first bit against Serpent Society and Sidewinder, I like Giancarlo Esposito. I like him as an actor, but I don't, again, one of my pet peeves is when they change the race of it. It's usually white, at least this version is, Seth. But, so I don't like the fact that I know his race has very little to do with, and it wouldn't be quite so bad if Giancarlo wore the costume, the mask, you see what, because again, usually Sidewinder, I had to look up and see because I wasn't quite certain. And that's what it doesn't bother me quite as much because I know Sidewinder, but usually when I see in his costume. So I had to look see what races was, because that guy, I have seen him occasionally, very seldom do without the, and that's my other, they didn't give costume. I wish that Sidewinder in costume, for instance, because again, these are superheroes. They are slowly overcoming the stigmata books, but they're still not willing to, for the most part, they haven't fully embraced what they're dealing with. I mean, yes, they've done a lot of costumes. I mean, Captain America's costume in the first Avengers it was, in his own movie, was fantastic. It was a bright blue color I like. But then they started darkening it, which again, I complained about. Some characters, Superman and Captain America being two of them, they need the brighter, in my opinion. Captain America, his costume should be in the flag, which is blue, red, and white. Though the starfield on the flag is a darker, but in the comics, usually it's a lighter blue, which is why costume it gives it a little more feeling of hope. And the darker colors, I don't know. I know people say it's more realistic, but again, I don't like using realistic when I'm talking about superhero comics by their very nature, but it is what it is. But yeah, I thought that Giancarlo did a good job. It's just I would have liked to have, again, not the race change, and I would have liked to see him in the costume. But he does have that very menacing, very evil vibe about him. Good job. Again, when they fought him, he was able to escape. Joaquin Torres wanted to be the new Falcon, wanted to be in the costume and all that. Cap wants him to train, so he takes him to Isaiah Brett, who showed up in the Falcon and Winter Soldier TV series. I know in the comics that Isaiah Brett, a couple decades back, rewrote history. His first appearance, again, they kind of rewrote history and said that Isaiah was a group of black men that they experimented on with the super soldier. Because again, back in World War II, back in medieval time, quotes, the government thanked down and lesser of black citizens, and they would use them for experiments. And I've got mixed feelings on it. I don't know as if the government to use someone that they don't quite full person, if you are a real person or whatever, however you want to give them powers. But I could see them using them for the earlier stages, trials. So, but yeah, no, Isaiah Bradley's not a bad character. Again, I haven't read a whole lot about him. I've read some here. And I think that Carl did a good job as the character. And I do like that his mind was taking control, and he was used as a president, bigger story. And I like that Sam, Isaiah, and calling Isaiah helps him. Again, I like Lovely, and like I said, the character itself, I'm not in love with, but I think it's a decent character. I will say that. I just, my main problem with is the rewriting of history, and same thing I had with Century and Triumph over at DC. I don't know. And at a certain point, I didn't mind stuff like that. And then I got to a point where I was just getting old or what, but here's some more behind the scenes stuff you never knew about. But a lot of that would have played up in the original story. So I don't know. I've got mixed feelings on it. Overall, it's a good character, and I like him in the movie. So, I mean, I am willing to give it that. I did like what he did in the movie, and I like the way they used him. And again, it just shows that, I mean, here we are 2025, and still the black man's being held down. The black man, this guy's being framed. And even when they found out that he was more than likely mind controlled, they still seemed reluctant or hesitant to release him until the very end when they finally pardoned him and released him. Come on, let the poor guy go. Let him go home and relax. Jeez. Like I say, Ross invites Wilson and Torres to come to the summits at the White House. And as I said, snag an invite for Bradley, which I know it's written that way, but if he hadn't brought Bradley to the White House, then he wouldn't attack the president and he wouldn't have been locked up. So I don't know. I like that development. And again, this is the way it's written. So, I mean, you can't really complain about it. You could, people do, but I'm just trying to think of the what ifs. Because I'm always, what happened to that? And again, they referenced the Eternals movie, which again, I thought was decent. Again, my main problem with it is race change or sex change a lot of the characters, especially the ones I know and familiar with. They change the races or sexes of. which, as I said before, I doesn't sit well. I don't like when they change race and or sex of a character just for the hell of it. I like the characters like I see them in the comics. So, and I do like that they've officially introduced adamantium into the universe. I know that Wolverine with his adamantium claws was in Deadpool. So I guess technically that was the first reference to adamantium in the Marvel Universe. But now they've got adamantium fully integrated into the universe. So I do like that. They're slowly bringing in the X-Men stuff into this universe. And again, it would be an arms race to try to get, everyone trying to get this new metal and who can, get the mining rights and the use of it. Because again, it can make whoever has access to that a very powerful nation. We move on to the next new character, Ruth Seraph, who is the character Sabra from the comics. Again, I'm vaguely familiar with her when I was reading the Spider-Man comics in the 90s. She would show up in the comics. She first appeared in Incredible Hulk 250, and then Hulk 256, the X-Corporation, X-Men. Like I said, I'm pretty sure I saw her several times. Is from the Spider-Man books. She's who serves the Messiah. She's the first really superhero in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They made her a black widow. So they've cut out a lot of origins and links. Just look around. I guess she was created the first Marvel comic. Maybe it was Captain America she showed. Again, this says she was originally envisioned to be Israeli, much like Red Guardian. But I know I've seen, I'm just looking real quick. It wasn't could have sworn I saw books from, again, the costume, cape, and a star class, feathers or something. I could understand it would change the costume, but again, I don't have any complaints about the character or the actress in this. I thought she did a great job. I like the character in here, and I'm just not with her comic book character about the change. And again, not that I want to complain, but I do. At least about, the changes they make in comics. So again, she's not, when I see the character, I'm like, oh, I remember her. What's her name? And just seeing her picture, it takes me a minute to think of it. And I could tell her name. And again, I can't remember where I saw her. I want to say it was Spider-Man. That still keeps hitting me beside the head, but I'm not going to swear to that. But, I do like that, Ruth helps out our heroes. Again, while she never dons a costume herself, which again, comics or comic book movies are more mainstream now, but I don't like that. To me, at least, it still seems like a lot of times they still try to avoid the costumes and some other look aspect. You've got to embrace your origins. At least I think so. And so I don't like the fact that they're avoiding and trying to dodge around some of the comic book stuff. To me, makes the character. But again, I'm a 55-year-old geek. So so America and Japan said the adamantium rights. They're trying to work together on it. Samuel Stearns behind the scenes causes problems, and I do like that we've got Samuel Stearns back as the leader. I'm not fond of his head in here. Again, they showed basically a large brain in his head kind of bulging out. I wish, and he's not, in my opinion, there were some scenes where he was green, but he didn't seem green enough for my liking. And again, I would have rather had, instead of like the head, slightly larger head with like the brain, I'd like to see a taller, much like, I know there probably would have been comparisons to Hector Hammond over Green Lantern books, since Hector Hammond was in the Green Lantern movie, the Ryan Reynolds one, which didn't do so great. And I know there would have been comparisons. Again, they are kind of similar characters. But again, I like the authenticity for these things. That's just where I'm coming from. But I do like when he started showing this, they had that Mr. Blue song playing. And as soon as they started playing that, that's the leader. Because again, in the Incredible Hulk movie, he was referenced as Mr. Blue and Banner was referenced as Mr. Green. I do like that callback to that. And again, they made some references to the movie, but to me, this movie really cements it as part of the same universe, which again, I like, because again, I really enjoyed that movie. So I like the fact that they're referencing the Hulk Abomination fight. They've got Samuel Stearns played by the same character, the same actor. They got Betty Ross in here at the very end, kind of like a spoiler at the very end scene. And again, I like that they Liv Tyler, because that was incredible. As I've talked, I forget on Facebook or someone. Well, I love Liv Tyler. I don't like her, aka Betty is the daughter of a general, a military man. She's not a member of the military. She's grown up with her dad. And Liv Tyler, while I love her, I think she's beautiful. She's too. The only word I can really describe creepy look about her, half time, like she's about ready. Again, she's a very emotional actress, and she does that very good. But it's hard for me to see her. She just doesn't have the gravitas, and nothing to do with her acting per se. It's just that's not who she is, and it's hard to do too much of a turnaround. For instance, in the first Incredible Hulk, where Jennifer Connelly boss, I thought Jennifer Connelly, beautiful and did a fantastic job. She that harder militaristic look and sound that I don't how she tries, bless her heart, that Liv Tyler just can't pull off that military daughter like Jennifer. Well, I did like, again, I like seeing, as I said, she's beautiful. I enjoy looking at her, but yeah, she just was. And again, she only had a scene at the very end, so it wasn't like she was in her much. But yeah, overall, even with the Incredible Hulk, for an actress playing Betty, because yeah, she's too sentimental to this character. But as I was saying, yeah, so we find out that Samuel Stearns is alive, that Ross has him since the incident of the Hulk and the Abomination, when he was trying to help Banner cure himself of being the Hulk, but that kind of backfired when the Abomination went berserk, breaking everything, and there was a big fight in Harlem. I love the rest of that. I do like it. Is, to me, it's very Ross. It's very much in the comic book character, if you will, to do something like this. Whole turns at unclassified site, as you say. I guess it was named Camp Uncle One, a black ops site, and holding on to him and using him for his own means. Not that Ross is necessarily a bad guy, a quotes good guy, but he does things the wrong way. What else I want? Back to Bat Seraph. Am I butchering that name still? Well, I did like her. Don't know if she was particularly, I don't think she did a whole, so if they weren't going to use her as her superhero self, they could have gotten away. And I was trying to remember who Dennis, he was in this movie, he was Sam's buddy, and he was helping, who was killed, is the Demolition Man. I remember seeing Demolition Man, first started reading, I got into comics in the late 80s, in an issue, one of the early issues I got of Avengers, he was wanting to join the team, I forget now, he's got a costume, it looks like he stole a costume, and pet a giant D on the, was just looking Demolition Man by Mike Carlin. First appeared as Demolition Man, 320 in April 87. Paul explained that his decision, Demolition Man, Captain America's newest partner. All of Cap's best past partners, the Falcon, have been less powerful. He was naturally this new guy can live 10 times, so he's no thoughts in the power department, and he's half-head to a different kind of relationship with him. And again, in the comics at least, he did have powers to an extent. And then, like I said, in the Avengers, for a while there, he was wearing the costume, but raggedy and interesting. It was just trying to see later established. Interesting. So yeah, so that's who, okay, and I knew that name sounded familiar, and I just couldn't, was. That's what, I like that they got Dennis Dunphy. I don't like the fact that he was killed before he got a chance to Demolition Man. Again, not that it's a big loss, not the Demolition Man comics. He's just, to me, at least he's just a little above a throwaway character, but he was in my early days of collecting comics, so to me that strikes an extra, it brings back the nostalgia, and it just, I don't know. I would have liked to see D-Man in himself with the costume in the movie. I think hilarious. And again, maybe that's why he's too much of a, again, that Wolverine ripoff costume. And just, I say, for the most part, again, he was Captain America's sidekick for a while. So before I got into it, he was a little more of a serious character. But at a certain point, he just came down hard on his luck and had this mental instability issue. I said, I want to remember being hooked, because I remember this. In fact, the image I remember thinking of, it was an Avengers comic. They were looking for new members or what it was, but they're like in this sitting room, whatever. D-Man was sitting by himself, and everyone was further away from him, left him a big space because he smelled. Because I said at the time he was homeless and he was trying to get to the Avengers, or trying to get into the to actually make something again. So again, I like D-Man, and I wish we could. Fortunately, Stearns killed that son of. Oh, anyway, and then we get to then again, Stearns is arrested. He's letting out everything. Ross kept him captive. Ross was behind all this. And Ross was having a press conference trying to get in front of it. But again, he loses control of his emotions. And again, as this is going on, Stearns is kind of egging him on. And I believe he had a speaker, or a mic to Ross's ear or something like that, taunting him, forcing him to again, in the middle of the press conference, Ross hulks out because Red Hulk. Different thoughts on this. I liked the Red Hulk in the movie. I thought he did a great job. I like Sam Wilson. He started fighting him. And a lot of people are like, how are you? Sam's an ordinary person. How do you fight the Hulk? Well, again, he's got the vibranium shield and the costume that's insulated, but armored and help protect him. And again, I like the fact that an ordinary human, if you will, he's got a lot of training, but he's trained with Captain America, for God's sake. But an ordinary human was able to fight against the Hulk. Not very well, but at least he didn't die, as that meme says. But did you die? And I like that, he realizes they can't take down the Hulk by force. He's just not powerful enough. So he's used psychology and emotion, and he's able to talk down and say, hey, your daughter, look where you're at. They ended up Cherry in D.C. And he's like, your daughter, you like taking the walks with your daughter through here. What would she think? Even though you guys are estranged, what would your daughter think about what you're doing? And that kind of calmed him down enough to allow him to transform back into Ross and be taken into custody. So I do like that they did have a major battle. Should the Red Hulk have been in there? Maybe. Again, most of the advertisements I saw had the Red Hulk. He seemed to be a major part of it. He was just in the last portion of the movie, the last act. So, and again, I understand this is and again, I can understand that this is the introduction of the Red Hulk. Hopefully appear elsewhere. We'll get some more of them. I'm hoping another Hulk, the Hulk and the Red Hulk go at it. Fantastic. And part of my problem, that's right, I like the comics. I'm not a fan of the when he showed up, they tried to make him they tried to make Banner's Hulk. In fact, they went so far, first show up, he had a series. When he first showed up, they had him punch out who's like a cosmic entity who doesn't get punched out on their basis. And again, his whole origins, at least, they kept trying they had Ross played by life. They had the two interacting. And so to do that was to have Ross be MD to throw you off to make this new, and later on someone else became he's not a bad character. I just shoved down our throats. No, he's more powerful than the regular Hulk. Do this. He can knock out the Watcher. You're pushing it. They're just trying to push him too. They should have and show is forcing it by having. But that's the comics. Again, I'm so behind. But I did enjoy the job. I guess he had. Which I get because again when I saw him in the comic after a certain point, okay, whatever. But they kind of introduced that whole heat thing when Peach blossoms, they touch him and his clothes was burning. So I do like they make reference to that. And again, I like the fact that they had Sam talk him down. Because again, it's no way in hell Sam's going to take down the Red Hulk or even the regular Hulk. So I do like that they were able to my mind at least, convincingly can make a way that he was able to take and at the very end, like I say, Ross had himself incarcerated at the raft where we get the visit by Betty. I won't say much more about Liv Tyler, Betty Ross. Beautiful to me, not Betty Ross. And then there's a post-credit scene. Again, when this movie go to the restroom, so I'm waiting, come on, let's get close. I gotta go to the restroom. So I'm like walking down the aisle watching the screen. So I'm down to where the exit's at, watching the post-credit scene. And Stearns is warning Wilson of an attack of the world. I'm not quite sure what that's referenced, but in Wikipedia, the off-screen, which makes sense. Right now in the TV, I could see that. But overall, it was a great movie. I liked Bucky Barnes showing up. I know a lot of people complain that Bucky should have been Captain America. And I understand because he was Captain America on the comics, but I think in the little harder because, again, he worked as a mind-controlled Russian spy. And it's a little harder, I think, to get him to become Captain America after that. Especially in the shorter time. Because in the comics, you've got a monthly comic that comes out for, decades. Here we got movies spanning decades, but you're only getting a year with some of these characters, maybe two if they cross over somewhere else. So I do like the fact, I do like Sam Wilson as Captain America. I'm minded if Bucky got in the Shield, but again, since Sam got in the comics, I don't mind. And Sam Wilson, a great choice in my opinion to get the Shield. And again, Sebastian Stan plays Bucky Barnes. He's going to be in the Thunderbolt in this movie. Made some references to Thunderbolts. We'll talk about that when it's not once, but I'll definitely check it out because I'm addicted to these things. This is my thing. But overall, like I've said at the beginning of this segment, really enjoy Captain Brave New World. I know suppose I word or something that got changed. So I definitely, again, in my opinion, thoughts, if you disagree with me, that's tough. No, I recommend people to see it. I think it's a great addition. Go in with an open mind. Don't go in expecting. If you go in expecting something, it's not. A lot of people get upset that for movies in general, don't do what they want. So that's a horrible movie. What you want doesn't make it. Thoughts on it. Again, I enjoy it. I definitely had time. I want to go see it, but I'll definitely watch it when it HBO, Disney Plus. When I buy the I'm definitely getting that because great movie. Highly recommend. That's going to do it for this segment. Short break and the next segment. Head Speaks will be back after these important messages.
Excited for 2016. In fact, I think we should record a promo about all the changes to the Fire and Water Podcast Network happening this year. What do you think, Rob?
That's a great idea. We can mention the new folks joining the network and all the shows. I can talk about how we'll continue with our Aquaman and Firestorm show, and I want to be sure to plug my movie show, the Film and Water Podcast. What about you, Ryan?
Oh, I think we should definitely record a promo. I'll mention how the Secret Origins podcast is joining the Fire and Water Network, and then I'll introduce my newly relaunched shows, Give Me Those Star Wars and Power of Fishnets, the Black Canary and Zatanna podcast. Sound good to you, Chris?
Absolutely. I'll mention the show I record with my lovely wife, Cindy, Supermates, the husband and wife Geekcast. We should probably also mention the Power Records podcast Rob and I do, too. What about you, Siskoid?
Well, sure. I can talk about my ensemble show, the Lonely Hearts Romance Comics Podcast, and my new upcoming shows about the DC Comics crossover event, Invasion, and yes, Oh Hot Moo. Shag, you think we should mention Hero Points, the most occasional DC Heroes role-playing podcast?
Sure, why not? And I can talk about Who's Who, the definitive podcast of the DC Universe, and mention my new upcoming show, Justice League International, Wahaha podcast. Now, here's what I'm thinking. When we record, I'm fine being the first person talking. I can explain all the changes to the
Wait a minute. Why do you get to start the promo? I'm just as much of a part of this as you are. It was my idea to create the Fire and Water podcast back in 2011. I should start off this promo.
I kind of think it should be one of the new voices who kick off the promo. It'll shock the listener into attention if it's not Rob or Shag.
Cindy and I make up 2 people in the network. Plus, ladies first, so we should be the first people talking on the promo.
Ben voyons donc.
You have got
What?
French cannot be the language of the Fire and Water Network.
Enough! Stop it. You're like boys with toys. Let's just make this simple. We can tell the folks at home the Fire and Water Podcast Network is growing in 2016. Several new shows are joining the network. We'll have a new dedicated website, a Twitter account, and Facebook page, and folks will be able to subscribe to each individual show or all of them. See, now was that so hard?
the Fire and Water Podcast Network, available soon through iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and fireandwaterpodcast.com.
Seriously, Shag, you had to get the last word, didn't you?
Come in, Aaron Moss, codename Head. I have an important mission for you, son. I need you to podcast about G.I. Joe, a real American hero, the comic book series previously published for Marvel Comics, currently being put out by IDW. Which issues, General Hawk? Issues? Well, son, you're going to cover the entire run, plus the yearbooks, special missions, order battle, everything, along with the cartoon. Wowzer, sir. That's a mighty large mission. That's why I'm assigning you several other Joes as they're available to help. And how do I report my findings? Monthly, at our main site, gijoe.headspeaks.com, on iTunes, and Stitcher Radio. Submit your report under G.I. Joe, a real American Headcast. Anything else, sir? You can get further information on the social medias, Facebook, Google+, Twitter, all under G.I. Joe, a real American Headcast. Dismissed, soldier. Yes, sir. And now I know. And knowing is half the battle.
Yo, Joe.
I believe there's a hero in all of us that keeps us honest, gives us strength, makes us noble.
And his name is
a damn fine cup of coffee.
Do you enjoy comic books? Do you perhaps enjoy reading said comics while also consuming a tasty beverage? Well, hello, my friend. I am the caffeinated Clinton Robinson, and I invite you to join me on the Coffee and Comics podcast, where I look at a random comic roughly in the span of time it takes to have a nice little coffee break. So if you enjoy casual comics discussion, and references potentially even more dated and randomly strung together than the ones in this promo, be sure to check out the Coffee and Comics podcast. Available on all the most brewtastic podcast apps.
Drink, I like it.
I know, it's great, right?
Another!
Hey, where are all my comic books?
And now back to Head Speaks. Hope you enjoyed that, those promos. Check out those shows. Let's go ahead to the next segment. Welcome to Retrospective of the 80s. And welcome to this month's Retrospective. So again, this month I'm just going to go over some few of the highlights of 1981. Because that's the year I picked last time. Well, I didn't pick. My random generator picked 1981. So I'm going to go some of the highlights, some of the new births, deaths, some of the top songs per Billboard, rap songs released, the rap albums released in 1980, the top movies from 1981, some of the toys, novels, and comic information. So let's get started. So again, important news from 1981. Again, this is just through Wikipedia, and I picked the ones that stood out to me. If I missed anything, feel free to send me an email to 1981@headspeaks.com. Again, if I missed anything throughout this entire segment, and I'll repeat this at the end, feel free to email me. You can send an email to 1981@headspeaks.com. com. So, the important news from 1980. In January, Reagan is sworn in as our 40th president. Ronald Reagan is sworn in as 50th president of the United States of America. Also in January, Iran released 52 Americans. It's been 4 days. Also in January, first DeLorean released in Northern Ireland. Again, I say that because DeLorean was used into the future. In March, John Hinckley Jr. attempts to assassinate Ronald Reagan. In April, the space shuttle industry, I guess, launches, and they launch the first space shuttle, and it returns a few days later. In May, I'll mention this later on, Bob Marley dies at the age of 36. Quite so young. In June, CDC first recognizes AIDS. It's picked up as a cold or pneumonia or something in California. I think it was Los Angeles. And they couldn't realize it's actually AIDS. So that's when it first gets recognized as a disease. And, well, it was from there. In July, Donkey Kong was released. Donkey Kong. Great game. And from Donkey Kong, we get Mario Brothers and their whole empire. In August, and before I go, I know that he was called Jumpman originally, but anyways, that's when Donkey Kong was first released in July of 1981. In August, MTV launches the first video. Well, they've launched, and the first video they played was Video Killed the Radio Star. Sadly, by this point in time, MTV's gone away. Well, it's still there, I guess. Play music television, like Sunday mornings, they'll play for an hour or two. But yes, this is when MTV first launched, August of 1981. I want my MTV.
Turn it on. Leave it on. America, see the music you want to see.
I want my MTV. All right.
I want my MTV.
I want my MTV.
24 hours a day on cable TV.
I want my MTV.
Yeah, too much is never enough.
And finally, in November of 1980, the Iran-Contra affair, quote, starts. President Ronald Reagan signs the top-secret National Security Decision Directive 17, which is NSDD-17, authorizing the CIA to recruit and support Contra rebels in Nicaragua. So that's the important news. If I missed anything that you think is important happened in 1981, let me know. Notable births in 1981. Again, there's a long list. I just went through and picked out the ones that either mean something to me or is geek-related. Captain America himself, Chris Evans, was born in June. Going over to Lord of the Rings, Elijah Wood. January. Jump over to Star Wars for a minute. We have Natalie Portman and Hayden Christensen was both born in 1981. Natalie born in June and Hayden born. It's funny that in the movie, Natalie's character is so much older than Hayden, but action reality, Hayden was born first, a couple months before her. Loki himself, Tom Hiddleston in February. God, it's making me feel old. 11 this year. These famous stars nowadays. Anyways, Justin Timberlake was born in January of 19. Beyonce, the queen bee herself, was born in September. Speaking of beautiful stars, Britney Spears, December of 1981. And finally, Bryce Dallas Howard, little Opie Cunningham's daughter, was born in March of 19, who's gone on to be an actress and a director herself. Notable deaths of 1980. Joe Louis, a boxer, had a heart attack. Bill Haley, of Bill Haley and the Comets fame, died of a brain tumor. Natalie Wood, old actress, hernia is the official cause. And Bob Marley, who I mentioned earlier, died of melanoma. The top songs, moving on from, we got a singer I mentioned there. Move on to this. This is per Billboard, the top songs of 1981. The top song of 1981 was Betty Davis' Eyes by Kim Carnes, followed by Endless Love by Diana Ross and Lionel Richie. Lady by Kenny Rogers. Starting Over by John Lennon, and the infamous Jessie's Girl by Rick Springfield. All great songs, and again, they're still, in my opinion, they're all popular today. But again, I love the 80s. And also, I'm just going to mention, number 11 for the top songs in 1981 was the theme for The Greatest American. I mentioned that in the commercial breaks, but yeah, that theme was the number 11 in 1981. And that was by Joey Scarberry. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing the name. Again, I'm always a fan of old school rap. So rap songs released this year. Again, there's a whole lot. These are just ones that stood out to me. Put a Boogie in Your Butt by The Treacherous Three. Do the Do by Curtis Blow. Also by the great man, Starlife. Again, I'm a big fan of Curtis Blow and all those old school rap. Spoonie G Is Back by Spoonie G was released. And the other one I mentioned is Rappin' Ain't No Thing by the Boogie Boys. Great group. All of them are great raps, great rappers and great group. Definitely. This rap album's released this year of 1981. There was only 2, it looks like. Again, this is all from Wikipedia. June 15th was Curtis Blow releasing Deuce. I love some Curtis Blow. And June 25th, another great group, The Sugar Hill Gang released Eighth Wonder. Fantastic album. Moving on to the movies. This is per Box Office Mojo. These are the movies with the highest box office receipts for 1981. Top in the list. Number 1 is Superman 2. Fantastic. Love Superman. There's a lot of problems with it, but it's a classic. Following that was Stripes, starring the wonderful actors Bill Murray and Harold Ramis. Fantastic. Great movie. I love that. Two Ghostbusters getting together to do an army movie. Love Stripes. Great movie. Anyways, the next one on the list is Cannonball Run. Another fantastic movie. I love that one. I used to watch it all the time growing up it was like HBO, Cinemax. One of those two was always on there, it seemed. So I watched several of the Cannonball movies all the time. Love them. For the James Bond fans, I'm looking at you, Jared, For Your Eyes Only. And finally, The Four Seasons. That one sounds familiar, but I can't quite place it. I have to look it up and see. That's the one I don't recall. In a quick look, who was in that one. It looks like that one was starring Alan Alda with Carol Burnett, Rita Moreno. I don't think I've seen that. It sounds familiar, but unwatched. Out of the top 5, I've only seen 4 that I could say. I may have seen The Four Seasons at some point, but it's not one that I could tell you what it's about. Moving on to the toys of 1981. This is a little hard to figure out what popular and what sold well. I couldn't really find a good site for that, but I did find a couple of sites that mentioned some of the toys. I will just mention some of the toys from 1981. I remember Rubik's Cube was a huge seller. I had several different types of Rubik's Cubes myself when I was younger. I remember I had several of the Rubik's Cube. I had the Rubik's Snake, the Triangle. There was a whole bunch of them. Rubik's Cube was a really big seller in 1980. I enjoyed playing with that. Was never very good at it. I'd often take it apart to put it back together to get it back together right. But yes, I was one of those. But yeah, I remember, in fact, I lived with my grandmother for a while when I got older, and there was a Rubik's Cube sitting up on a shelf, a couple, I think. And it just got stuck up there and just left up there for years. Also, in 1981, what I'm looking at, it looks like He-Man toys were released. He-Man came out in 1981. I never had any of the toys. I wanted them. My mom thought I was getting a little too old for He-Man toys, so I didn't get any of the toys. But I used to watch the cartoon, read some of the comics. I was a fan of He-Man. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed some of the newer stuff that came out. I enjoyed the Kevin Smith relaunch that he did here on Netflix. I'm hesitant about the movie. I'm not going to get into that right now, but we'll see. But I'll watch it when it comes out. But yeah, He-Man, I guess, was about 1981 was when it was first launched. And Star Wars Empire Strikes Back. It came out in 1980, it looks like, but it was popular in 1981. And again, I remember getting the Star Wars Empire Strikes Back toys. In fact, I got very few of the Return of the Jedi. I think Empire Strikes Back is where that and the original Star Wars was my big Star Wars toy. For whatever reason, yeah, in 83 when Empire came out, I didn't get very many of those toys. But I got a few, but yeah, I didn't get as much as I got of this. Because again, my mom stopped buying me toys for Christmas or as many toys because she didn't think, I was getting too old for that. So and here I am now, 55 years old, surrounded by toys in my manland. So take that, Mom. But those are just a few of the toys from 1981. Something else I'm really fond of, books. We move on to the books and novels of 1981, from what I could find on the inner tube up to it. In 1981, Stephen King had 2 books released. Roadwork and Cujo. I didn't read either one of them at the time, but I've read them since then. For some reason, I didn't really get into Stephen King when I was younger. I watched a lot of his movies, but I didn't start reading his books when I was a little bit older. I don't know. But yeah, Stephen King, great author. I love most of his stuff. I thought The Dark Tower went on a little long and he kept getting delayed, and then he had his accident, which I think kind of threw things off. But Roadwork and Cujo, both great stories. Love them both. Especially Cujo. Great, fantastic book. Also in 1981, for Dungeons & Dragons. As I've talked about, on Saturday nights, I play Dungeons & Dragons with my son. And Friday nights, usually the wife and I play online with some guys, D&D. I DM that, or Dungeon Master that. So, but in 81, there was the what's called the BX version, which was the Mulvaney and Cook rules. That was the updated basic rules and expert rules. Came out that year. And also the Fiend Folio came out. That's one I remember that book. It had a Githyanki on the cover, I believe it is. I believe that's how I pronounce it. It's a skeletal warrior of a type. But yeah, those D&D books came out in 1981. And that was about the time I got my first set of D&D books, if I'm not mistaken. I think the red set was out at that point. That may have been the red set. I think that's what I got. But yeah, that's about the time I started getting into D&D. Again, there's a lot more, but those couple that I found, again, from comic books. Kids think I'm a big comic book fan. This is from Wikipedia. These are some of the comic mentions of 1981. If I miss anything that you think I should mention, send me an email. You can email me at comics@headspeaks.com. Days of Future Past starts in 1981. That was like a 2 or 3 issue storyline of the X-Men where Kitty Pryde of the future gets sent back to the past and tries to stop the Sentinels being created and destroying all the X-Men. There was a movie here this last decade or so of Days of Future Past that kind of sort of went along with it, but I had some issues with it. But anyways, it was a good story. It was started off as a futuristic X-Men story where I think it was Kitty Pryde was sent to the past and tried to stop, I think it was Senator Kelly from getting the Sentinels going and wiping out all the X-Men. Great story. Frank Miller starts writing on Daredevil. Jeanette Kahn becomes the president of DC Comics, had a good run. Detective Comics 500 came out in 1981. Also 1981, we had Superman and Spider-Man, The Heroes in the Holocaust, which was a sequel to the previously released Superman versus The Amazing Spider, the earlier DC and Marvel crossover books. Great stories. They've reprinted them several different ways. There's a trade paperback with them all. They've reprinted them in different formats. Definitely check those out. Staying with Marvel, we're halfway talking about Marvel right now. Spider-Man, John Byrne starts writing a fantastic run on Fantastic. Great write. I love John Byrne. I've read some of this period of Fantastic Four, did some great work. Back over at DC Comics, The Flash, number 300 came out. I don't think I ever got that one, but I picked up The Flash. Like I said, I picked up the last couple of years of The Flash, the Trial of the Flash and back issue, because it was done over with by the time, this year, The Flash 300 came out. Also this year, Super Friends, the comic book, is canceled with issue 47. Again, never really picked up the comic, but I watched the cartoon all the time, loved the Super Friends. And this year, the comic ran its course. Also this year, going back to the DC Marvel crossover, DC Super Series number 27, Batman vs. the Incredible Hulk came out. Batman vs. the Incredible Hulk, another DC Marvel crossover story. Very good also. I've read that one in a couple different ways and a couple different over the years. I've had reprints, or I think I may have had one of the originals also, but good story. But anyways, just briefly, that's 1981. I'll save some stuff for the next time because, again, I'm doing it on a randomizer. And when I get 81 again, I'll go in more detail on some of these, or we'll see what happens when I get to it. But speaking of which, it's about that time. Brother Head, pull out the randomizer. And the randomizer pulls out the year of 1983. So next time I do a retrospective of the 80s, it'll be the year 1980, thanks to my randomizer. And that's going to do it for this episode of Head Speaks. Before I go, I do want to give out Head's final thoughts. Some I wrote down to start doing, and I do this more often. Just Head's final thoughts. March of 2025. Again, I won't get too political or anything because, again, I don't want to piss off too many listeners, but the way our politics is and the way our world is nowadays, some final thoughts from Brother Head. Just be kind to one another. I think I've said this before. I'll say it again. It doesn't cost anything to be kind. It shows who you really are. And especially with the way a lot of people act nowadays, you never know what your fellow man's going through. Maybe they're going through depression. Maybe they're having a bad day. If you can, just be kind to your fellow man. Also, if you want to record any messages, you can do that. You can send it to me at headspeaks.com, and I can read your messages on the air. I can play it over there if you record a message, or you send me an email to head@headspeaks.com. Again, if you like what I'm doing here, you can go over to the Patreon and throw a few bucks in the tin. I don't have any letters, so I have a mailbag, but I do want to give a shout out to my Patreon sponsors. Again, over at patreon.com/headcastnetwork. We have a couple of great guys over there that's helping in, chipping a few bucks into the tin, whichever it is. So I want to give a special shout out to Sean Adams and Big Danny Cool. I mentioned at the start of the show, I mentioned him again. Thank you both, Big Danny Cool and Sean Adams. Also want to give a shout out to Bill Bear, another Patreon supporter, and fellow podcaster and friend of mine, Mean Gene, the Podcasting Machine. Those are all sponsors and Patreons of Head Speaks and the Headcast Network. Thank you guys very much. But that's going to end it for this episode of Head Speaks. Join us next month when I will be looking at, something else. Some dice here. Roll the dice and see. It doesn't tell me anything. We'll be looking at something next month. I don't know what it is yet. Maybe 1983, maybe some other comic books. Again, I got a lot of ideas in mind. It's just a matter of time getting them done and figuring out how I'm doing this stuff. So join us next month. And remember, until next month, Head has spoken. Thank you for joining us on another great episode of Head Speaks. I can also be found rambling on other Headcast Network shows, such as the Task Force X Headcast, where I cover all the appearances of the Suicide Squad and Checkmate comic books from the late 80s, early 90s, over on G.I. Joe, a Real American Headcast, where me and my guest hosts look back at the comic book and TV series from the 80s. And in addition, we also have Bravo Team, where we look at other G.I. Joe related paraphernalia. And over on the Starman Adventure Show, where I reread the Will Payton Starman comics and talk about them, once again from the late 80s. In addition, myself and my wife Michelle, along with our friend from the land down under, Hayden McQueenie, talks about the TV show Quantum Leap monthly over on the Starbright Project. All of the Headcast Network shows can be found on your favorite podcatcher or at my home on the internet, which is at headcast.headspeaks.com. Over on Facebook, X, and Instagram, look for Headcast Network. And please feel free to email your bitches, moans, and gripes to head@headspeaks.com. Also, feel free to email any compliment you have. If you want to record a message, you can send it to me at head@headspeaks.com, and I'll play it on the air. And be sure to join us next time for another fun-filled Headcast from your friendly neighborhood brother Head. And be sure to tell a friend. Until next time, I'll see you in the funny pages.